I'm Mel Torrefranca, author of Capsule, which was just released in July of 2021. I also wrote the book Leaving Wishville. I published this book when I was 17 years old. I started writing it when I was 14 during my freshman year of high school, so it is very much a sentimental story to me, and it will always hold a special place in my heart. And if you watched our recent videos here at Lost Island Press, then that means you know that Leaving Wishville has been translated into Spanish, which is so cool. But I also realized that I never actually did a video where I just sat down and read the first scene of Leaving Wishville, so that's what we're going to be doing today. But anyways, let us just dive right into it. It would make a tragic story. Benji Marino, 14, kills himself on a venture to paradise. A catchy title for the announcements on Wishville News before the morning weather report. On the other hand, he might survive. Benji emerged around the corner of Wishville Junior High, eyes locked on a hill in the distance. All he had to do was make it to Candy Road, and his escape would be a sweet success. He held his breath as he passed the school baseball field. Nice one, back in line. Benji could recognize the man's voice from a mile away. Coach Hendrick was notorious for never using a microphone at school events. After 15 years of coaching baseball and softball teams, he'd reached the conclusion that screaming was the only way to gain respect from middle schoolers. Mortimer, you're up next. There was a pause, and his mustache twitched as if going through a seizure. Mortimer! A clang came from the fence. Benji refused to look. Hey. Chloe Mortimer ran her fingers along the wires, walking at a matched pace. Where are you headed? Chloe was the youngest student in his 8th grade class, with a birthday at the end of November, but she didn't act the part. She was more mature than most kids their age, gave the best advice, and could have a serious conversation despite her energetic, fidgety nature. Chloe was the type of friend Benji could trust with anything, and although he hated lying to her, he would if he had to, especially today. He watched the ground as they walked, his shoes tapping the concrete in rhythm with her cleats clicking the dirt. She had outgrown her cleats months ago, and although they were originally white, they were now yellowed from use. She held a strange attachment to them, and he wondered how long it would take her to buy new ones. Benji tucked his hands into his sweatshirt pocket and held his head straight, knowing that looking at her would be too painful. Thought I'd take a walk. Oh yeah? Chloe paused, scooping a softball from the ground. She ran back to his side and tossed it into the sky. Come on, I know something's up. She held her arm out and the ball dropped into her palm. You're planning something crazy, aren't you? Why would you think, Benji, a seagull could lie better than you? He made the mistake of facing her. Their eyes met through the wire fence, and he froze. I get that you're curious, but we're not going to let you run off into the wild. Her smile was gone now. I mean, come on. You may as well throw your own dead body in a gutter. Coach Hendrick shouted for Chloe through cupped palms, but she didn't turn away. Benji folded his fingers inside his pocket, waiting for the right moment. When a few girls from the team shouted Chloe in unison, she looked over her shoulder, and he ran. She dropped the softball and shot after him. The gate slammed shut, followed by the hollow steps of her cleats against the sidewalk. It took 3 weeks of self-preparation for this day, and although Chloe wouldn't let him get away, he wouldn't let her stop him either. Listen. Her breathing staggered, barely allowing the words to escape her lips. You think no one would care? How would your mom react? She gasped and sprinted with her last bit of energy, a final attempt to catch him. He saw the tilted sign of Candy Road ahead. By the time he reached it, Chloe was far behind, hands on her knees, panting. With a forced grin, he hiked up the hill. Chloe had been one of his best friends since 1st grade, and it was unfortunate that the last memory she'd have of him was the moment he disappeared into the trees. Sweat formed at the creases of his floppy hair. He rubbed the mess out of his face with a tensed hand. It's okay, he thought. It'll be worth it. Candy Road was close enough to the edge of Wishville that no one dared to breathe its air. Since the bridge was never maintained, neither was the road. Roots of surrounding evergreen trees grew into it, forming cracks for moss to grow and bumps designed to trip. But to Benji, it was better this way. The road was steep, so he used the roots to push his feet forward. Candy Road had grown a set of natural stairs. When he reached the top, he paused at the base of the bridge in nostalgia. The water gently flowing at the horizon, the sour scent of damp dirt, the gray sky looming over him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been here, yet the atmosphere was familiar, comforting. He took his first step onto the wide platform of concrete and shut his eyes. Living in Wishville his whole life, he'd grown deaf to the ocean, but today the waves thrashed beneath him violently. He opened his eyes to reveal a rusty sign across the bridge, surrounded by a sea of redwood trees. Leaving Wishville, it read. This marked the end of his journey. His grip on the straps of his backpack tightened as he peeked over the bridge railing. His school by the shore, the town park a few blocks to the east, everything was there. Further north were the brick buildings of the town square, Main Street running past it. He lifted his head until his nose leveled with a hill on the opposite end of town, of which yielded a single secluded home. Everything he knew, and he was ready to leave it all behind. Goodbye, Wishville. Benji waved at the view. Facing the mission before him, he engaged in a staring contest with the sign. After a long blink, a new spark brewed in his eyes. He took long and speedy strides across the bridge, reaching closer to the end than ever before. The tree branches by the sign reached forward, calling for him to continue, to finally break through Wishville into a new world. His right foot stretched for the border, and the other side of the bridge illuminated with extravagant colors, the vomit green trees, the musty blue sky, the overpowering browns. He could hear the chirping of distant birds suppressing the screaming seagulls that flew over his head. The colors and sounds were so immersing that he couldn't hear the rustling of bushes behind him, the hammering footsteps. It wasn't until his foot retracted against its will that Benji broke from his daze. He stumbled backwards, the sky fading gray, the trees losing their animation, the dirt as bland and cold as ever. The only colors available were the few familiar wisps of brick red hair that flashed his vision. Boo! The hand released his backpack with a sturdy throw, and Benji crashed into the railing by the waist. The hungry waves jumped beneath the bridge, trying to reach him. He turned around, head spinning. To his left was James Coy. He wore a white-collared shirt underneath his sweater vest and the latest designer shoes. James had always been a natural at fashion, which was odd since no one could imagine him standing in front of a mirror. Perhaps his elegant style was simply an accident every morning. He completed the outfit with an expressionless mask, not a single fold on his forehead or a tilt of his lips either up or down. You're going to get yourself killed. To Benji's right was Samantha Perkins, who went exclusively by Sam. Benji almost smiled at the sight of her wearing last year's school jogathon shirt, which she didn't participate in. She tucked her hands into the pockets of her fluffy jacket, and a few chuckles escaped her lips. You should have seen the look on your face. She paused her laughter to imitate the exact moment. Boo! Leaning over, she broke into hysteria until her cheeks were as red as her knotted hair. Benji could never understand her. Sometimes everything was funny and other times everything was somehow meant to insult her. Sam's emotions were as predictable as flipping a coin. When Sam extinguished her humor, James repositioned himself next to Benji. It's illogical to leave. He gave Benji's head a shove from above, taking advantage of his height. You're smarter than this. The idea of staying in Wishville sickened him. I know it doesn't make sense. He pointed to the end of the bridge. But don't you guys ever wonder what's out there? Couldn't care less. Sam crossed her legs and her raspy voice smoothened. Although I guess it's different when your dad goes missing. James glared at her, and she pursed her lips with raised brows. Benji spun around and set his arms on the bridge railing. There's a lot I wish I knew. He watched the seagulls zoom across the horizon, left and right, up and down, wherever they wanted to. By the way, we were Plan B. Sam chuckled. I can't believe Chloe couldn't talk you out of it. You're such a pain. Benji shot for the end of the bridge, but James formed a wall in front of him. Sam stepped away, and a twig snapped beneath her sneaker. Let's go back. Knowing James wouldn't move, Benji tucked his frozen hands into the pockets of his sweatshirt and walked back the way he came. As he took his first step down Candy Road, he peeked over his shoulder to spot the Leaving Wishville sign one last time. He held his head low, the glow in his eyes gone. You know, we're only doing this because we care, Sam said. He scanned the ground for the next route to step on. How did you know? She looked to James, asking permission to tell. He nodded. Well, you were acting all suspicious. Took way more notes during class than usual. You searched my binder, didn't you? You weren't taking notes on prepositional phrases. That's the thing. Sam's sneaker chipped against a root, but she caught her balance and recovered. You literally wrote your entire escape plan. Date, time, everything. James ran a hand through his hair. Not smart. Well, Benji said, I guess I'll have to be smarter next time. He smiled, and Sam jabbed him in the side. Alright, that concludes the first scene of Leaving Wishville. I hope you enjoyed it. This was my very first book, and if you're interested in learning more about this book, whether it be the English version or the Spanish edition, I'm going to have a link to the Lost Island Press website in the description box below. I recommend you sign up for our newsletter. I'm actually the one who writes them. I send them out on the first day of every month, and it's just cool. I hope to see you there. But anyways, thank you so much for being here on the Lost Island Press YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next video.